Happy Father's Day, everybody, from Two Old Bloggers. We want to wish you the best of Father's Day. We are doing the show a little bit early today because my buddy here, Darren, has a tournament that he has to participate in early. He almost didn't make it today, but we're glad he did. And today's show is going to be a series of what's happened this week in Vikings land. It'll be a little bit different, but we're going to have fun. So, we'll take the biggest stories from the week, interact with you, our diehard fans, and we've got a lot to cover today. So, let's dive right in. Next on Two Old Bloggers. Rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey, once again, happy Father's Day to everybody out there, and we appreciate you joining the show from Raymond and Mary and Drew and SKOL for Life Barber and Prisma Saw. Sorry, buddy, I have a hard time pronouncing your name. Jason, Daniel, welcome to the show, even though it is early. How are you doing today, Darren? And what is this tournament I referenced?
Oh, it's a fast pitch, fastball tournament. I'm not sure what you call it down the States.
Was it softball or baseball?
It's softball, yeah, softball.
Okay.
So
Fast pitch softball.
Fast pitch softball. So men's one. We have it every kind of June, mid-June. Freezing here today. so we play
not here in Texas, brother. Not here in Texas.
Yeah, but yeah, most people in the States are familiar with the women's fast pitch, which is humongous sport amongst the women. But there is a men also play it a little bit more niche-y. Not as widespread, but there's world championships and all that stuff. That's not the level that I'm playing at, but it's just, it's funny because when I was at Costa Rica in March I ran into a couple of people, Americans, and one of them had played high level fast pitch, and she saw I had a softball hat, and she was like, "Did you coach?" I said, "Well, yeah, and I played." And she said, "But you're a man. Men don't play fast pitch." I said, "Oh, yes, they do." Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm up to today. 2:30 Mountain playing the semifinal, and then win that one and play in the final. So we'll see.
Wish you luck. Wish you luck. What position?
Well, I used to be a center fielder, but now that I'm in my mid-50s, my team has decided I should be playing first base.
Arm isn't quite what it used to be. Is that what they're telling you?
Your arm maybe not quite as quick and nimble on the with the old legs, but I still feel I can play out there. But they've got other ideas, so whatever. Well, I'm still playing. So
yes, and that's amazing, absolutely fantastic to see and hear. Today we're just going to be doing news and notes we've heard this week. As are moving into summer. Summer officially starts on Thursday, but the summer break for your Minnesota Vikings started end of last week, as we have that 5-week period between now and training camp, and we'll get into that. So it's nothing but a big this week in Vikings land.
Lots of topics.
Yep, and speaking of training camp, the Minnesota Vikings put out their important dates for training camp this year. I've already got it marked on my calendar so that we can track it and follow it. And if you're in Minnesota or near Minnesota, can make it to the cities, these are dates you want to pay attention to so you can go check it out. We start off with July 27th being the back together weekend. That's when everybody comes back. The 29th is the first padded practice, and yeah, buddy, the boys get to finally hit. and I can't wait for that. Then we have August 5th, the night practice, the famous night practice where you can bring your family and friends and get to watch. And then August 8th is the last open practice. Well, it seems sort of short to me. Does it to you? It's only about 13, 14 days. If that.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, it does. It does feel. It feels like they're starting late, and then a little bit later. But I don't know. I think last year they got going on the July 25th or something like that. So it might be a day or two later. But it does seem pretty compressed, but I mean, I guess the last open practice doesn't. There's lots of practices after that, but it does seem compressed. But yeah, I don't know if this is. We know the Vikings are very focused on player injury and load management and all that stuff, and they put a lot of thought into it. And for the most part, it's worked out pretty well for them the past 2 years. I think, as far as preventing a lot of serious injuries to multiple players on your roster. Now we have had some big injuries like JJ's hammy and Cousins' Achilles and that sort of thing. But the way they've got it set up, their training program, the kind of wear and tear or how intense those practices are very intentional on how they sort it out. So yeah, it seems short, but it seems to have worked the past 2 years. And until it doesn't, I'll keep on. I won't really be concerned about it. It certainly beats all the. Remember, there was a rampant, or like 4 or 5 years ago, there was all these pec tears that we kept on getting with guys, and we don't seem to hear as much about those anymore.
Yes, well, and I'm not. You're going at it from the player health. I'm just going at it from the fans' availability to watch it. It seems compressed and short. If I remember, we used to go 2 or 3 weeks where fans could go watch, and then maybe me just getting older, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Sarah, we'll be talking about that a little bit later. They won't like us either, or at least me. But training camp is our next big event on the way. And so we should be looking forward to it. And don't forget, we have 3 games during the whole training camp period called preseason. First one's going to be against the Las Vegas Raiders, and it's our nationally televised game. It will be live on NFL Network on the day, August 10th at 3 p.m. Central, and it is at U.S. Bank Stadium. And the folks in the local area, if they can get tickets, can go watch. It's the only home game for the Vikings this preseason. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to see a lot of J.J. McCarthy during the preseason. I don't expect to see a lot of Sam Darnold whatsoever. Then we traveled down.
Really?
Yeah. Then we traveled down to the Cleveland Browns. And this is where we're going to have our joint practice. I've got Dalvin Tomlinson up there. We get to see our old buddy. But Kevin Stefanski and Kevin O'Connell have worked their magic. They're going to do that joint practice thing. That's where you're going to see most of the ones versus the ones, and the twos versus the twos, in a more controlled style. And then that Saturday, they'll play, and you're going to see, again, probably the way O'Connell likes to do it, all the backups playing, not the ones that generally get that off, and we'll find out. And it follows up by the third preseason game where we travel out to Philadelphia and play the Eagles. And again, there, I fully expect we're not going to see much of the starters. We're going to see everybody else on the roster get a lot of playing time. And this is the one where you're seeing even the lowest parts of the roster going, because they're making their decisions on who they're going to cut. That, I think it's Tuesday after this game. So it should be interesting to see. Are any of those 3 preseason games of interest to you, Darren?
They all are, just because I think, like a lot of us, I'm a Vikings nerd, so I actually enjoy seeing the scrubs or the backups out there fighting for things. You talk about not seeing a lot of starters. We're going to get into it later, but I think one of the interesting things to watch as far as how O'Connell handles the amount of snaps they get is the interior guard situation. And like, okay, we don't really have a starting left guard right now, but we know Dalton Risner has started in 5 years in the NFL. So normally he would be a vet who wouldn't really set on the field except for a couple of series, but that's not his situation coming into the Vikings right now. And the guy he's competing against, Blake Brandel, has never been a starter at the NFL level. So how much play is Risner and Brandel going to get at left guard? And maybe even the right guard situation. Like you said, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So they all interest me. I think what interests me again is just how O'Connell is going to handle it. He's had a pretty clear MO the past two, and that basically the starters don't start. But if you got a few positions like one of our outside cornerback situations, like who is Shaq Griffin the starter? Is it Caleb Evans a starter? And the guard situation, punter, place kicker, those things are all need to be hashed out. Third wide receiver even. So there's a few areas there where I think that we'll get into. I want to see how O'Connell handles it. And you talking about Sam Darnold, probably not going to see him very much. I wonder about that just because Darnold's in with a new team, a new offense. He hasn't really been a starter in the last 2 years. Does he need more preseason time than you would typically expect from your number one quarterback because of his newness to the team, his newness to his teammates, and in a different offensive system than what he's been in the past 2 years. So, but I think you're going to see a lot of JJ McCarthy, and I think that's going to keep all Vikings fans interested because we're going to parse over every handoff he gives, every pass he makes, every successful or unsuccessful play is going to be
every drop back, looking at his
every
footwork.
drop back. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's going to be all heavily scrutinized, and we'll probably overreact way too much to everything good and bad that is done. But I do think that it's very important for McCarthy to at least look competent while he's in there in whatever snaps he gets. Because if he doesn't, then we're going to overreact, and it's not the end of the world, but it's not great either. you know? Yeah.
I got you. It's going to be interesting. And I look forward to it. I don't look forward to the fact that we got to wait 5 weeks, but that's
and we'll
normal.
Start to find out how the Vikings might approach the new kickoff rules, and how they're going to approach it when they're kicking off and when they're returning kicks. Are they going to use 2 kickoff returners, 3, just 1? Who are those going to be?
How are they going to set up for it?
Yep. What personnel are they using to block and cover those kickoffs? So that'll be an interesting thing. And I think in that case, Matt Daniels can't hide a whole lot of stuff because he's got to figure out like what works and what doesn't. So whatever schemes that they're using for that, I think you'll see them in full use during the 3 preseason games.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be fascinating. I just wish it'd get here sooner. But we'll find out.
It'll come here quicker than you think.
Now, earlier in the week, Coach Kevin O'Connell was on the show, on the Rich Eisen show, and he said some interesting things.
Yes, he did.
He mentioned that J.J. McCarthy had been getting some first-team reps. That's right. Our rookie had made some waves, which is good. We want to see that. He, when it comes to starting quarterback, though, however, he said that Sam Darnold was going to be the guy who starts as QB1 for training camp. And to me, that makes sense. He emphasized how competitive camp will be, and the door isn't closed for guys like J.J. McCarthy or Nick Mullins or even Jaron Hall. He talked about how it's going to be competitive. And to quote him, or to quote Kevin Seifert reporting on him, it was Seifert said, the first 2 weeks of training camp, O'Connell said, will be about really identifying and setting the stage for how he wants the competition wants some of these competitions to fairly play out. We talked about it just a minute ago, whether it be a quarterback or interior line at guard, whichever guard position, or corner, how all that's going to hash out. They're going to decide, probably have a pretty good depth chart within the first 2 weeks as to where they want people, where they plan on putting them throughout the rest of training camp. So it's going to be interesting. He also said it's a blessing that they're in this position. Kevin, I agree with you. I think it is a blessing. Anytime you're a NFL coach and you got to decide on which good player is better than the other good player, that's a good problem to have. So Drew's letting us know that Eisen went to Michigan makes him a champion. And Drew, as you know, your partner in crime, Ted, also said the Unabomber went to Michigan as well. So just to let you know.
Good and bad and all alumni at every university, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. As far as the actual QB competition, Matt Collar reported that Kevin O'Connell said, we're going to have a competitive camp where we give our guys an opportunity to both on the practice field and in joint practice and in the games to identify the quarterback room, what that quarterback room is going to look like. It's perfectly okay for guys to have individual improvement and developmental plans on different timelines. And I think that's the key for Kevin O'Connell. He's got a plan for all four guys. And it's how those guys meet that plan as to where they're going to fit. Do you think that's going to work?
I think it will. And Kevin O'Connell says that based on past experience, because last year he used 4 quarterbacks when he only wanted to use one
right.
for the entire year. So it makes sense to me. And I think what he does there is he continually taking the pressure off of particularly JJ McCarthy on everybody pining for when he's going to start and why isn't it happening now? And so pretty clear that, like we said last week, they got a plan and McCarthy will not be the number one guy until he checks all the boxes in that plan, which I think is smart because, again, so many quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, get thrown in when they're not ready. It doesn't work out very well a lot of the time, and we don't want that to happen with J.J. McCarthy. If it takes 12 months for him to be ready to be our starter, I'm quite fine with that, even if it leads to a season where the Vikings are 7-10 or 6-11
right.
or 8-9, something like that. But this is a marathon. It's not a sprint with him. To use the old cliche, we're taking the long view here, or we should be, and that's what O'Connell's all of his public statements have been pointing towards that, and I agree. Really. For me, yeah, McCarthy's development is interesting, and I don't know whether I'm starting to get into the Irv Smith Jr. Cam Dantzler thing, but I'm interested to see how Jaron Hall develops from year one to this year. Whether last year he got thrown to the wolves a couple of times, it didn't turn out so well the second time, but that experience, if he's as level-headed and smart and as even-keeled as he was billed to be and as he appears to be when he talks publicly to the reporters, then I think that's the experience he got last year, which was a little bit more than maybe the Vikings were hoping for with him and his development. I'm hoping that he has taken that the right way and used it to become a better player, because my hope for Jaron Hall is, like, again, I've never, as you said, Dave, I've never viewed him as being like a guaranteed starter. Of course, he's a 5th round draft pick. What I would like to see is for him to gradually develop so that he can be a backup, get to the point where he's a backup, where if you put him in games, you're confident that he can keep you in the game and win you games, kind of like where Nick Mullins is right now. Mm-hmm. And maybe he plays even a little bit better than that, where even if McCarthy pans out and is everything we hope him to be, Hall is legitimately good enough that we can actually use him to get a high draft pick a year or two from now because teams see him as a potentially viable starter.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I want to answer Drew's question. Does Matt Collar play guitar for Cheap Trick? For Cheap Trick, no. But Matt is, and I said Matt, he likes Matthew. Matthew is an avid guitar player there, Drew. He owns quite a few guitars and he loves playing. Just to let you know, that chess and sports are his life. So now I want to give a shout out on this segment to a friend of mine and a friend of the show, Mr. Warren Ludford. Warren Ludford over at Daily Norseman has been doing some outstanding writing over there. And he wrote a piece this week. When will J.J. McCarthy be, quote, ready to start, and when should he, and why timing may not be such a key factor after all? I highly encourage you to go check it out. Warren did a fantastic job on breaking down why, if JJ's ready to go week one, it should be week one. If JJ's ready to go in the middle of the season, it's in the middle of the season. If JJ gets to sit behind Darnold all season because Darnold's balling out, but JJ's still learning and filling that plan, filling those boxes, that's when JJ gets to start, after the fact. And he believes as soon as all those boxes are filled, JJ should start. But he breaks down those boxes in a way I hadn't seen written before. That's why I encourage you to go check out Warren's piece. Warren Ludford has been writing for a good long time. He was on Climbing a Pocket for a little bit. He's a good man, and he knows how to break it down. But I highly suggest, if you want to set in your mind where JJ should start, he breaks it down in a way that I haven't seen written by anybody else. Not Matthew Collar, not Arif Hassan, not any of your beat writers, none of them. Warren did a great job, and I highly encourage you to go check it out.
We should get him on the show sometime, Dave.
We should. Our next little topic of what happened during the week, and it started with this man, Mr. Stefon Diggs. Stefon made a comment about how when he was traded to the Bills, it seemed it wasn't with a kind intent. Okay. Not quite sure about that, but okay. Folks in the chat, I'd love to know what you think. Was Stefon Diggs traded to the Bills out of ill intent? Did Zimmer or Spielman so pissed off they said, screw you, we're going to send you to the worst team we can think of, we're going to send you to the Bills? We know it worked out in Buffalo. He got a big extension. He made tons of money, and he made his quarterback look absolutely fantastic. But was it due to ill intent, or was it due to something else? We all remember Diggsy who could get a little bit upset. And there was a particular practice that he didn't show up to on a Wednesday back in 2019 for non-injury related reasons. And we heard there a pipe broke in his house or whatever it was, but he didn't participate. And he wasn't a full participant on that Thursday. As Sarah said, should have sent that ungrateful individual to Carolina, possibly. And then he came out, said he wasn't feeling well. And then there was the infamous tweet, or the infamous press conference. We know about the tweets, the eyeball emojis and all the different emojis, and you had to decipher what he meant, what he was thinking. But there was the press conference where he said there's truth to all rumors when he was asked about a possible trade. Well, it seemed to me at the time Diggs was trying to get out of Minnesota. Not that Minnesota was trying to get rid of Diggs. And they eventually let him go. They shipped him off to a very good team on the rise because they believed in him. And that's the way it was. But he didn't think so for some reason. Now, their whole idea was Minnesota at the time was preferring a ground and pound approach to football. And we all know Zimmer loves the run, loves to pound it. We joke about he wants 1995 football. And that's the way he was. But during those games, we saw that the wide receivers got frustrated. Both Diggs and Thielen were frustrated. Well, why were they frustrated? Was they frustrated because they were handing the ball off to number 33 back here, Dalvin Cook? No, that wasn't the reason they were frustrated. The reason they were frustrated, and I want to use a quote here. This quote comes from Kevin Patra, writing for NFL.com. The following Sunday's loss, Thielen voiced frustration, noting when a team stops the run, the Vikings have to be able to hit the deep balls. Thus far, Cousins has come up short. Why was Cousins coming up short? It was because he had been a check down machine. Kirk Cousins at that time was check down Charlie. Stefon Diggs and Adam Thielen both wanted more of an aggressive aerial attack. But they weren't getting the aggressive aerial attack. And we were seeing them. I was watching the All-22 film, and you see both these guys wide open. But the ball wasn't going there. The ball was going to C.J. Ham. The ball was going to Kyle Rudolph, right? And it was all way shy of the yard marker, generally. And I could see why they got frustrated. And Stefon, being the emotional individual he is, got even more frustrated, and that eventually led to the trade. But I don't think it was of ill intent on the Vikings' part. Do you, Darren?
No, they got rid of him because he was making it clear to them that he didn't want to be there anymore. And we see that from players occasionally. And there's no way the Vikings at the time would have wanted to willingly trade Stefon Diggs, who was in the prime of his career. Actually, he hadn't reached the prime of his career, was under, even though he had signed an extension, it was a pretty reasonable extension that he had signed. So he was a productive young player whose best years were ahead of him, and he wasn't costing you an arm and a leg. And I think that the Vikings definitely wanted to trade him. There was no ill intent. Sending him to Buffalo, the only bad part of that for Diggs would be the weather, because you'd be playing outdoors in Buffalo in November and December, which cannot be pleasant sometimes. But there was an ill intent there. Diggs was causing a fuss, and Sarah and Daniel mentioned it below. Maybe, I don't know if diva is too strong of a word to put, but if you look how things played out this year in Buffalo, kind of the same deal, right? Like where Diggs was... You've got a team that's having success. The Vikings in 2019 were having a pretty good year. The best year they had it was the best team, the best year of the Cousins era in Minnesota. They actually won a playoff game. But Diggs's usage had been down. At least the amount of balls he was getting targeted pass to seeing were way down from the previous year in 2018. And we went over this 3 or 4 weeks ago on our show, talking about the Diggs trade. So I think that he saw that he was probably going to be, with him and Thielen, he was not going to be the number one guy there. Definitely. He was not likely going to be catching 100 or more passes a year with the Mike Zimmer offense. And he felt that there was better places for him where he could be better production and get more money in that third contract and play for a team that was more pass first, potentially with a better quarterback. You can have your arguments whether you think Josh Allen is better than Kirk Cousins, but I think the most people would agree that Allen is better than Cousins in a number of ways.
Well, and Cousins didn't break out until he got under O'Connell. is my argument. That's
Yes.
when he started to, all right, I won't be as conservative and do all the dink and dunk, check down Charlie stuff. I'll start making longer throws and trusting my receivers. He didn't do that prior to O'Connell. And Zimmer wasn't the type to mentor him to do that. That wasn't Zimmer's style.
And if you're
in any way,
Diggs,
shape, or form.
yeah, and if you're Diggs, you've just seen 2018 and 2019 and seen what Kirk Cousins does as a quarterback, and your thoughts would probably be, well, what's the chances of this changing? Probably not very good. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I did no intel by the Vikings. They were kind of forced into this. They didn't have to trade him, but you don't want an unhappy star player on your team in the next season, because that's just going to lead to more tweets, more no-shows, more when he talks to the media, you never know what he's going to say. And who knows what's happening in the background with the players and the chemistry of the team. Is there bad blood between him and Cousins, or him and the head coach, or him and the offensive coordinator? You want players who want to be there. If they don't want to be there, even the best, you gotta let them go.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and they did. And I think it was best for both at the time. And of course, what we got out of that was a fantastic deal. But
yeah, doesn't always work out that way. But
no,
we were
it generally doesn't. But I think the Vikings were trying to be kind to Stefon Diggs, and I think they were. It's the fact that he is still grousing about it is a little disturbing, but oh well.
Again, Randy Moss was kind of similar, right? Moss talked his way out of a bunch of places, even though he was wildly talented, and as we know, maybe the best wide receiver the NFL has ever seen, if not the best, the second best. And Drew's right below. He talked about how Diggs won't be slurped and coddled with the Texans. They got Nico Collins, Tank Dell, C.J. Stroud, and even Mitchie and Robert Woods, I think, are still there, who are potentially could be nice supplementary targets. The Texans don't need Diggs to have a very good offense in 2024. Diggs sort of, I think, needs them to get to the Super Bowl, which is really what he wants.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Well, that brings us to the next bit of stuff, and this is a callback from last week. Last week we talked about how N'Keal Harry was making the transition to tight end. And we thought, this is interesting. And then it actually started at the end of last season when he was notified, we're going to try you at tight end. And as you all know, N'Keal Harry was drafted 32nd in the first round by the New England Patriots. So he's got that first round pedigree, but he's never quite developed as that wide receiver. He's big, he's got size, he can catch the ball, he can do everything you want, but he doesn't have quite the speed of a wide receiver you'd expect. So they're trying to move him into tight end. And we discussed this last week, whether it will work or whether it won't. Well, there's some more research done by buddy of ours and co-founder on Climbing the Pocket, Tyler Fornes. He looked up and talked about how many times it has succeeded. And the first one he talks about is former Hall of Famer Shannon Sharpe, who played most of his career for the Denver Donkeys. He made the transition from wide receiver to tight end and led to a fantastic career and eventually a gold jacket. So there's one that you can go, yeah, work for him. Well, he also found another one, Darren Waller. Darren Waller was a Raider. And Darren Waller made the successful transition in his fourth season. Waller, in his first season as tight end, caught 90 passes for 1,145 yards, 3 touchdowns, and had an even better season after that in 2020. His career went poorly after that. He started to age and get hurt and stuff. But he made a successful transition as well. And people would ask last week if anybody, and I said, well, there's a couple that we know of. Ron Johnson, who's on Care 11 in Minneapolis and does Locked On series for Locked On Vikings and Locked On Minnesota. he made the transition from wide receiver to tight end with the Ravens. It didn't turn out so well. He failed. And I think he got injured in his second or third year and he was done. But he made that transition. And also there's Jordan Matthews for the Eagles that went from wide receiver to tight end. And eventually it failed. He went on to play a few more years, but was not near successful. But it was a successful transition. It just wasn't, he didn't amount to much at that position either. He wasn't a wide receiver, so they tried him tight end, and there was some productivity, but it wasn't spectacular. Question is, will N'Keal Harry be on the plus side of, hey, this was a good move, or is this just another step towards the end of his career? What do you think, Darren?
Well, the successful and not successful wide receiver to tight end examples that you just cited, we got asked that question last week when we brought this up. I can't remember who asked us exactly the exact question.
Dalton.
Yeah, but the exact question was, has it ever worked? And I remember you brought up Ron Johnson. I hadn't even thought about that. And I think Matthews, but we'd forgotten about Shannon Sharp, which should be the most obvious example there is out there. Also, when that came to mind, it reminded me, I think Logan Thomas is his name. He made the transition from quarterback to tight end. He was a quarterback in Virginia Tech, and then he became a tight end with Washington. I don't know if he's still in the league, but anyway. So there are examples where tight ends or players who played other positions become a tight end. For N'Keal Harry, I'm not overly optimistic that he's going to turn into a Darren Waller, but or a Shannon Sharp for that matter. But it's certainly worth taking a shot at it. And because he is big, he does have good hands. He can make contested catches. Sounds like a perfect guy to throw it up on 50-50 balls in the red zone or in the end zone. And that's something that the Vikings have lacked for the past since Kyle Rudolph, stopped being, a big effective tight end, is that big bodied target that you can just throw it to, even if they're not really open, and they're going to catch it because they're so damn big. And N'Keal Harry's got the size and the physicality of DK Metcalf, like you said. He just doesn't have the explosiveness and the speed of DK Metcalf, which is why it probably hasn't worked out for him as a wide receiver, but could very well work out for him as a tight end. Maybe not at Minnesota, but maybe somewhere. Actually, although we hope it is Minnesota, because outside of TJ Hawkinson, I still kind of wonder, even with the Tonyan signing, who is the guy that can emerge as a viable wide receiver, receiving threat at tight end when Hawkinson is dinged up, unable to, and he could be out for a long stretch of the 2024 season, 4 games, 6 games, 8 games, 10 games. We just don't know at this point. So looking at anybody who can step up and be be what Tyler Conklin was after Rudolph left and Irv Smith got hurt, and he'd been a number 3 guy, been lying in the weeds for 3 seasons. Then he got in there and he became a guy who you had to account for as a receiver at the tight end position. With TJ Hawkinson out for however many games, we need somebody to be Tyler Conklin, at least at the beginning of the season. I don't expect it to be Harry, but again, he's got the wide receiver chops. He just needs to learn some of the other things, the finer things about playing tight end.
And I hope it works out for, our sake as Vikings fans and for his sake as well. It will help. And I agree with you 100%. Well, that brings us to the next part, the one that you were really wanting to talk about from the beginning. We're getting into the O-line. Kevin O'Connell confirmed there's an open competition at guard position. This means that Dalton Risner will be going head-to-head with Ed Ingram on the right side and Blake Brandel on the left. Our offensive line has seen tons of changes with new players coming in and leaving, veterans like Dan Feeney and Michael Juergens or newcomers like Michael Juergens, the rookie, will be a battle worth watching. And I very much want to see how Juergens plays during the preseason. And we should see a lot of it because I expect this kid to be a part of the Vikings for quite a while. And I think he has the talent to be develop into a starter and be with the Vikings for quite a while. I'm excited about him.
He's a guy that I have my eye on too, just because of Ryan Grigson's post-draft comments about him and how they had their eye on this guy for 2 or 3 years. They think, they were really impressed with what he could do, his ability to be multifaceted and flexible and where he can play center or guard. So yes, even though a 7th round draft pick, we did him and Rodriguez, the defensive lineman, are two intriguing 7th round draft picks because, again, Ryan Grigson was was glowing about this kid. So that tells me something, that they'd been charting him for a while. They had their eye on him. So they see something in him that a lot of teams did not see. And we're going to find out in training camp what that is.
And whether it's at guard or whether it's at center, because he's played both, I'm looking forward to that very much so. Now, Kevin O'Connell said, I think the offensive line has really been solidified. Obviously with the 2 tackles, we have to bring back Dalton Risner, who's going to compete like crazy at the guard spot with both Ed Ingram and Blake Brandel, was his quote on that. A closer look at the O-line competition, and this is going to be the second time I do this today, was done by our friend Warren Ludford. He wrote a great piece earlier in the week. And it's rare that I call out anybody twice in the same show. That's how good Warren's writing has been this last week, and I don't want to highlight it. But he breaks down the whole, how this is sort of developed and how it's going to go. We went from Ezra Cleveland in the middle last year. He's gone. Austin Schlottman's gone. He's now with the Giants. Chris Reed is still an available free agent. That tells you how much interest the entire NFL has on him. We have Dan Feeney as one of the new guys. We have Juergens. Obviously, Feeney and Juergens both have experience at guard and center. So how they develop, and it's going to be fun to watch them both, is going to be interesting. The Vikings, as we know, extended Blake Brandel, gave him a 3-year contract. However, they did bring back Dalton Risner for a 1 incentive-laden contract. If you're looking at contracts, I think Brandel's got it over Risner, but we'll find out. Then you have some other people. We had Henry Bird off the practice squad last season. Tyrese Robinson was on the practice squad last season. I don't expect much of them. And we brought in UDFA's Spencer Rowland and Doug Nestor, along with Jeremy Flax. So these are going to be names you're not used to seeing, but that we're going to want to watch in the preseason, see if something stands out. Maybe it will. And then over on the tackle side, we drafted in the 6th round Walter Rouse, right? The big tackle out of Oklahoma. And hopefully he may play some guard. I thought at the beginning that he would be moved down to guard, but I'm being told no, and they're going to give him a shot at tackle first. But we'll find out. So it's going to be interesting. Now, we all know Brian O'Neill is locked in. He's one of the bookend tackles. Christian Darrisaw is locked in at the other bookend tackle. Now, Brian O'Neill right now is making about $23 million this season. Darrisaw will be making a minimum, he'll have a $16 million cap hit next season in his final season of his rookie deal. $16 million for a premier left tackle is dirt cheap. We're going to want to extend him. And then once we extend him, the average per will jump well in excess of $20 million. As Warren writes, I would put it over 25, closer to 25, but over 25 million for a top of the line left tackle. You're going to pay him that much. And that's all planned. It's in the plan. People are, how can we afford it? It's in the plan. They planned this out for years. They expect this. So it's all accounted for. I expect it to happen. So we're going to find out. But what Warren got to is that the performance of the Blake Brandels, the Dalton Risners, the Garrett Bradburys are going to be key, because how are we saving money? We got top money going out, obviously, to Justin Jefferson. Top money is going out to Brian O'Neill. It will go out to Christian Darrisaw. That's a lot of money on the offensive side. How do you keep it balanced? And his theory, and I agree with him, is that you've got to have in the guards, you have to have functional guards and centers, because you can't pay everybody top 20 player position money. The cap isn't that large, but you've got to be able to find, and how the Vikings have decided is that they'll sacrifice on the interior for now and work around that. And it's up to Chris Cooper, our old line coach, to make sure all that works. And it's a give and take when you pick out your premier positions you want to pay, and then the other ones you have to, and right now it's the interior. Do you agree with that or not?
I think that I do think that's how the Vikings have to play it, Dave, because as you said, and this is what, as you said, you can't pay, that goes with every position. Like very few teams can afford to pay. I've said this before, that you can, at each position, you can afford to pay one guy, that top level money. But you can't pay three linebackers number one linebacker money. Well, you can, but then you're going to have paying like low rent guys in lots of other places all over your corners, or your defensive line, or your defensive ends, or you're going to have to sacrifice somewhere and get by with dirt cheap veterans or cheap rookies. And that's the Vikings. With the way they drafted, we know that they've invested heavily over the past 6 years in the offensive line, and that they've got their top five has got 3 number one draft picks, or like 2 number ones. Sorry, they had 2 number ones at one point at the start last year, and 3 guys they picked in the second round. Ingram, O'Neill, and Cleveland were all second rounders. Darrison and Bradbury were first rounders. So when you do that, you know that if they all develop the way that that you hope they will, you're going to have to pay each of them top money. But what has happened here is that didn't happen with all of them. In which case, but what has happened is that the Vikings, the tackles, have emerged and played the way the Vikings expected them to, based on where they drafted them. And so they're paying them, or they're going to have to pay them to keep them. And yes, in the interior, things have been a little bit different. I think they got rid of it. Maybe part of the reason they got rid of Ezra Cleveland was because they felt they wouldn't be able to afford to keep him at the salary that maybe he wanted. So they moved on and got something for him. Bradbury, they don't have to worry about, because he's never going to sign for any more than he is signed for now, based on his level of play. And Ingram, you've got to just you wait and see how it plays out. But I agree that right now, they know the tackles are really good, so they're going to do everything they can to keep those. And on the interior, in that case, you got to be smart with your drafting and make some right picks on mid-round draft picks, or day 2, day 3 draft picks. So you hope that you hit on guys like Ed Ingram, and that he develops. And then by the 4th or 5th year, if he's a guy you want to keep, you've got a decision to make on whether you want to pay him or draft to replace him or sign a veteran. And then with Bradbury and the left guard position, whether it's Risner or Blake Brandel or wherever, you're hoping to get a veteran who can come in there and not be a turnstile.
All that while you're developing young talent that you identified in a draft like this year. And hopefully that works out, so you're not having to worry about it so much, but that you have depth and you've got a feeder pipeline that you've built. that keeps coming in. And I think that will be the key to success. We're going to have to wait and find out. It's going to take a few years from now before we can truly evaluate, did they do the right thing? And have they built up that sort of feeder type system, whether it be Rouse as, a swing tackle, or Juergens, coming in and eventually replacing Bradbury, if that's the case, or whatever it is. Are they finding these people that can develop in the background and eventually Ed Ingram? If Ed Ingram, gets it this season and then he has a fantastic third year and then next year has a fantastic fourth year, he'll be asking starting guard money. Well, if we can't afford it, will he get starting guard money someplace else? And do we have somebody already in our pocket that can step in? If you can develop that type of system, you can make this work and make it work to a T.
You can, and then 2 or 3 years down the road, somebody like Brian O'Neill is at a stage where you're looking to replace him, actually, and you don't have to pay him anymore. You might have to pay somebody else. And we've seen situations across the league, Dave, where teams have had to make these decisions on offensive line. The Kansas City Chiefs had to do it a couple of years ago. They'd signed Joe Thuney to a big deal. They got Creed Humphrey, who becomes an all-world center. They traded for Orlando Brown Jr. They couldn't keep Orlando Brown Jr. because they have these other guys to pay. Trey Smith on the interior. That's I think he's due for an extension this year, next, and he's turned into an all-pro level player. So they had to make decisions. The Dallas Cowboys, when they had that kick-ass offensive line, was it in 2008 or 2000, whenever it was, when they had Zach Martin and Tyron Smith and all five made the all-pro or something like that, Frederick at center, they couldn't keep them all. They had to let a couple of them go, and they had to bring in replacements for that. So you can't pay everybody on the offensive line the top starter, top level money for their position. You got to make some decisions there. And if you got a guy or two who has shown that they are really good and you want to keep them, then you have to take that draft and develop approach to filling the other positions. Look for veterans who might be undervalued and who you think can play well,
who have a chance to exceed their contract.
Exceed their contract and play at a solid, at least a league average level. Hey, in this case, the Vikings have the interior is where they've got to focus that draft and develop and bargain shopping and hope you hit on them strategy. It hasn't worked all that great so far, but maybe 2024 will be a little bit different.
Grandizer, the symbol on my shirt is a W and a T, Whiskey Tango, and it stands for Whiskey Tribe. And you know how I love my whiskey. Is what that's for. Yes, Lorenzo, both sides of the ball. It applies to both sides, and especially when you're talking lines and linemen. You betcha. Now, that brings us to the next topic. Our buddy, our pal, this is Sarah's favorite, Kirk Cousins. Last week, the NFL came down with its punishment of Atlanta for tampering, obvious tampering. And what did they do? They went, bad Falcons, bad Falcons. Right? It wasn't hardly anything. They lost a 5th-round pick to get a starting quarterback.
And some fines for
pocket change fines. It wasn't hardly anything. Now, people say, well, everything's treated on a case-by-case basis. Well, the NFL needs to review some of that because they seem to favor some teams and not others. And I wrote, as a disgruntled Vikings fan, always expect the Vikings to get the raw end of the deal when it comes to NFL actions like this. The Vikings aren't anywhere close to being one of the league favorites. The league has its favorite teams, and we know who they are, whether it be the Dallas Cowboys, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Green Bay Packers, or your big city teams, the New York Giants, the LA Rams, stuff like that, those are the favorites because they get the viewers and they get the money and all that. Oh, the NFL and Roger Goodell just loves them and kisses them and puts them to bed every night. Atlanta Falcons, because of who their owner and GM is, they're super involved at the NFL level. So they get the little slap on the wrist. And that's it. We didn't get squat. And as a Vikings fan, by now you should learn, anytime this happens, don't bet on the Vikings getting anything. If they do, be pleasantly surprised. But don't expect it because the Vikings aren't loved by New York. I don't know if it goes back to, the 1400s. Maybe Leif Erikson came down and, slaughtered some of Roger Goodell's descendants. I have no idea, but we do not get played with well by the league.
Dr. Proto talking about who's the head of the competition committee, and that's Mr. Rich McKay, who is employed by the Atlanta Falcons.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And like I said, I didn't expect anything out of it. Much
Me
more
neither.
than what happened. And we said that, but I know there's a lot of Vikings fans that got upset. It's not worth it. Just know that the Vikings will always get the short end of that stick. And if we get more, be pleasantly surprised. But that's the way it always has been. We'll find out. Lorenzo, they'll eventually look for Brian O'Neill's replacement. And then who knows, it may be Rouse in a few years. But it's something that they need to. Offensive linemen and some good defensive linemen can usually go into their mid-30s. So we'll see on how that works out. Now, when it comes to tampering, friend of the show, Judd Zolgad over at SKOL North, had 2 ideas how to solve this. And both of them are good, and I really like the second one the best. Judd said, all right, rather than bullshit the system like happens now, where they say you can't, legal tampering is now 2 days before the start of the league new year. Rather than do that, actually move the legal tampering period to when it actually starts, quote, the combine. And we know it actually starts probably at the seniors games, whether it be the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, or whichever bowl it is. They're usually starting back then, but especially during the combine when everybody gets together and the agents are there. All right, move the date, start there and say, hey, this is the new date. You can start tampering now. That would be one logical response, and maybe that happens. His second idea, which I prefer and like, and I think is brilliant, is to do what the NHL does. They can sell exclusive rights for a team to negotiate with a free agent player once the season's over and before the new league year starts. If the Atlanta Falcons wanted to negotiate with Kirk Cousins, they could say, sure, give us a 6th-round pick. And you'll have exclusive rights to discuss it with him. The NHL does that now. I think it would be fantastic. And because I think NFL teams and GMs would go, okay, you want to? Here, that's going to cost you. Now, it's still up to you to make the deal work. If Kirk says, no, I want to stay with Minnesota, then we get your pick and you're shit out of luck. So there's risk on both sides, but it makes it legal and it makes it more costly for the team that actually wants to do it. In this case, Atlanta. If Atlanta say, hey, we'll give you a 6th-round pick so we can negotiate, or a 5th, or whatever it is, and then both sides are cool with that, let it be. Minnesota gets something. Atlanta gets exclusive rights to grab the guy they want first, and they don't have to worry about, the rest of the league. They could do that. And I think that would be a fantastic solution. What say you, Darren? Do you like the NHL version that Judd has proposed?
I do, because I think that the other option that Judd mentions about moving it up, well, that would just move up the illegal tampering as well. So instead of them doing it whenever they at the combine, they'll do it after the regular season's over for a particular player or that sort of thing. Also, the NFL has to do something, because it's laughable to me that you've got a legal tampering period. Well, tampering is supposed to be something that you cannot do. So if you're allowing them to do it, then it is no longer illegal. Like, it's no longer tampering. It's just negotiation. So they got to change what they call that there. And I think that actually the NHL thing where a team can sell, trade, exclusive negotiating rights to another team that wants to look into signing a player that was under contract with you for a contract with them, makes a lot of sense. I think that it would. Would it end a bit of the intrigue of free agency and who's after who and all of those sorts of rumors that are always fun to read? If you knew that Atlanta had sent a fourth rounder to the Vikings to have exclusive negotiating rights to Kirk Cousins, yeah, but I think it also makes things. It ends the silliness that we have here, where teams are tampering with potential free agents all over the league, and the NFL is turning a more or less a blind eye to it. And whatever system you put in place, though, Dave, the NFL has to get serious about enforcing it. So you can have this trade, you're trading for exclusive negotiating rights, but again, if teams are doing, testing the waters even before that without a trade in place, the NFL has to penalize the team seriously for doing that, so that teams know that the penalties are too harsh to make it worth their while.
I agree. I like Grandizer's idea. It could be a party, a fundraising event. Yes, very, very well could. They could turn it into that. It would be fun. Well, that brings us. We're trying to wind down the show. We still got quite a bit left.
Yeah, that's true.
Earlier in the week, rumors came around Twitter that J.J. McCarthy's going to hold out until he gets a lump sum of his signing bonus. And this came from Twitter user Pretty Ricky, who, you think, Pretty Ricky, who's got a name like that? Well, he came out with some stuff during the draft and other times that shows he's connected, that came true. Not everything he said has come true, but a good majority of it has, and it's obviously inside source. Well, Tyler went into this earlier in the week, and I wanted to continue with it. He did some great research on this. What is interesting is they haven't done a lot of things before, and people are wondering, well, should we give him his whole signing bonus at once? We discussed it on the Real Forno show, and I'm saying, well, why not just split it up like they normally do? And then he goes, well, you can invest it and make more money because compound interest is a thing. If there's players smart enough to do that and they have good enough people around, they do that. They can make more money. I understand that completely. But would the Vikings be setting a new precedent was basically the question. And it came down to, well, would they? Right? Obviously, the Vikings set a new precedent when they signed this guy after the 2017 season, gave him all that guaranteed money. That had never been done. They did that, right? We had the extension of T.J. Hawkinson, and then, of course, Justin Jefferson just got his, setting a market. So the Vikings aren't averse to setting something new, much to the chagrin of the rest of the NFL. So if they pay JJ, their only top 10 drafted quarterback ever, their full signing bonus, it's not something new, actually. It's been done before. I know people are sort of like scoffing, but because he hasn't taken a snap yet. Well, I remember when Sam Bradford was drafted and was given $50 million and hadn't taken a snap yet, thus bringing in the rookie scale after that. But you've had people like Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud, all have, Zach Wilson even, all have their signing bonuses paid up front. And also, Trevon Walker did so the next year. He's a defensive edge. So will McCarthy get his full bonus? Do you think the Vikings are going to say, well, yeah, all right, here's your check?
If I don't know what purpose it would serve for the Vikings to play hardball with this one, especially if it leads to McCarthy holding out at training camp and missing out on valuable development time that that Kevin O'Connell wants him to have in his rookie season. So if this would be a sticking point, I don't think the Vikings are going to. They're going to find a way to make this work for both sides. So if he really wants to hold out, then the Vikings are going to do. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to do whatever he can to maybe not set that precedent. But if it means getting J.J. McCarthy into camp and his team is dead set on that, then I think they're going to find a way to do it. But if this does get out and doesn't get settled, it would be Viking fans will get over it, but Viking fans that'll put a little chink in McCarthy's golden boy image that, hey, I thought he was a team first guy. I thought he was all about the team. And I
thought he wasn't like Kirk Cousins, all about the money. Yep.
Now he's in the pro and it's all about the money. So it'd be McCarthy's team would have to weigh the risks of making that kind of a strong arm move at this point in his career as well. And I don't know if they're really willing to do that. I mean, McCarthy, that he doesn't want to miss training camp because he's telling everybody that'll listen that I'm in this facility every day, 23 hours a day. So yep. He does not want to miss any part of training camp and fall behind his development as an NFL player. The Vikings don't want that. And it could potentially, if he was to miss, a few weeks, that could set his rookie year not on the right path that he wants and the Vikings want.
Well, I expect that it won't be an issue. I expect if the agent's holding out that they're going to pay it. I'm not worried about it. But yes, you don't want to. I don't think they're going to make a deal out of it on either side, no matter who sticks to it. Because they want him in. They want him to develop. And they have a plan. And I am so happy this season. One of the reasons I'm so happy is I think everybody's on the same page. I think the Wilfs have bought into the plan. Kwesi has his plan. Kevin O'Connell has his plan that trickles on down to every single player. And everybody's bought in. They're all walking the same line. And we haven't seen that in a while. And I think it's going to go. And I think this is just a hiccup. One of those clerical type things. They'll turn it over to Brez, make it happen type shit. And it's going to go away. We're not going to hear squat about it, but we'll find out. Well, Grandizer, the whole idea is that, supposedly his agent says he'll hold out. And that's the issue. It's the holdout. Don't hold out. If he doesn't hold out, and then I don't think they're going to worry about it. I don't think it's much of a big deal. We'll find out here in 5 weeks, but I fully expect he's going to sign his contract prior to training camp starting. I don't expect there to be a hiccup.
No. And in between now and then, the Vikings have to sign all of their draft picks, which they have not done yet. And usually that happens in pretty quick order. Is because everybody's slotted in. Everybody knows what rounds you're picked in. You're slotted into a certain
there's only bracket. So much play. Now there's a little bit more with quarterbacks, but there's only so much play you can make, and that happens every team. Every team's sitting in basically the same place. They've got draft picks round 7 through probably 3, but a guaranteed 4 is already signed. And then they're just working on the last bits. So, and yes. Grandizer, that could be bad advice, but he's got the same agent that Justin Jefferson has. So he's got a decent agent. So we'll find out. Speaking of Justin Jefferson, Netflix announced this week we're going to have receiver. This is the wide receiver version of what was quarterback a couple years ago that featured Kirk Cousins. This is the wide receiver version, and it features Justin Jefferson, which should be fantastic, should be fun. Jefferson, we know, had a fantastic season last year, minus the injury, and it shows him going through the rehab. But then he had he had over 1,000 yards on the season or whatever his final stats were, and missed 7 games doing it. And it's just amazing. Justin Jefferson's absolutely a freak of a wide receiver, and I can't wait to watch it. Comes out July 10th on Netflix, and it should be fun to watch. But there was a little clip that came out this week that had me laughing. And it starred no other than Hitman Harrison Smith. Did you see the clip?
I did not, Dave. I have not seen it.
Well, if we look back here, you see that one of the receivers featured here is actually a tight end, George Kittle.
Mm-hmm.
And the clip was Kittle goes up to catch the ball, and Harrison Hitman Smith hits him. Bam! Turns his head, hits him with his shoulder. Didn't go low, didn't go high, did everything possible to protect a tight end who's up in the air. George Kittle had a little bit of a hard time getting up and walking to the sideline or the huddle after that. There is a reason we wore cups when I played back in the day. And you take a risk if you do not. And George Kittle took that risk, and it failed. And he was not happy. And I think Harrison Smith just smiled. It was a freak. He wasn't aiming there. It just happened to happen. But he got him in his baby-making parts. And George Kittle was hurting after the fact. I thought it was funny. I can't wait to see it on TV, and George Kittle's reaction, because he was not feeling pleasant after that.
No, nobody would. It can't be fun to have a 220-pound pro athlete hit you in the balls.
But it was funny. And I look forward to the series. It starts July 10th. It'll be, that's only, a month away? Yeah. And we'll get some relief from this dead period between now and training camp, and we get to watch JJ and then search for the one clip. I can't wait.
And I was surprisingly into and enjoyed the quarterback series that Netflix ran. Was it 2 years ago or a year ago anyway?
2 years ago.
I didn't think that I was going to watch it. I wasn't particularly interested in even watching Kirk Cousins, but but I did watch it, and I'm glad I did. It was a good series, and I will watch the receiver series not just because Justin Jefferson was in it, but it'll be interesting to see the other. You did get the quarterback series did give you what I liked was the aspects into the off the field stuff that they did and the training that they do to get to play at the level that they do at the NFL. And I found it fascinating. Didn't surprise me, but the things that they did was certainly illuminating for me. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how receivers, approach that off the field, getting their body ready mentally, physically, and everything to perform at the highest level they can at their sport.
Yeah, it should be fascinating. And also remember, speaking of off-season TV, Hard Knocks this year will be of the Chicago Bears. The Bears. With their new quarterback. And that should be interesting to watch as well. That brings us to our final segment. I know. It's been a long show, folks, but we appreciate you hanging around with us. Brings us to your final segment where Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated was talking about how Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was crushing it. Now, we used crushing it a couple weeks ago, last week. But how he has the Minnesota Vikings as the the most likely to succeed unwatched team. What's the term I'm looking for? The dark horse.
Underrated. Oh,
dark horse team. And that they have done so well. And it's because of what Kwesi has done, Kevin O'Connell, and Brian Flores is his deal. He says the Vikings' future looks so bright. And he first points out that after 6 seasons, the Minnesota Vikings got rid of Kirk Cousins, and the Falcons signed a $180 million contract with him. The Vikings have now gone to acquire journeyman Sam Darnold, who could have the best season of his career under Kevin O'Connell. We'll have to find out, yet to be determined, who we all expect. And, of course, they drafted their quarterback of the future, J.J. McCarthy, at number 10. But with this Cousins' departure, they opened up cap space that they'll have next year. The Vikings are already starting to reload on the defense. They brought in Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. We talked about this last week. And Blake Cashman. And they're supposed to have still a ton of cap space next season to sign further players, to sign Darisaw to his extension. And the Vikings betting on McCarthy, along with this smart rebuild, is what's got him so excited about the Minnesota Vikings and hope that they can make it back to the Super Bowl or into the Super Bowl, at least opening up that window. And we'll find out. Jonathan Harrison of Sports Illustrated reported, with stars all in their prime along the offense and the defense rebuilding under Brian Flores, the Vikings need their bet on McCarthy to pay off, and they could be looking at a wide open Super Bowl window for the next several years. From your lips, Jonathan, to Odin's ears, may that happen. And both Jonathan and Albert Breer, they see that. We see that as fans. Do you disagree, Darren?
I don't disagree because, it was last week we talked about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's offseason, how he had crushed it, at least in my opinion, with the decisions he made with not bringing back Kirk Cousins, at least not at the price that Kirk Cousins was willing to come back for, drafting a quarterback of the future, what they decided, how they handled the Daniil Hunter situation. They didn't re-sign him, something I wanted them to do, but they did sign guys like Grenard, Van Ginkel, Browning Cashman, drafted Dallas Turner. And then the getting Justin Jefferson signed to a contract extension, and just the way the salary cap space has been reworked in the 2+ years that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been general manager. So yes, the Vikings they've got some nice pieces on both offense and defense that any team would like to have. They have, and the cap space allows them next year, 2025, and potentially into 2026. The cap space is looking good, so that if they want to get some guys to upgrade at certain positions of need, then finances will not be the issue for them. And that has not been the case the previous 3-4 seasons and longer for the Vikings. So well done, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah there. And so if you've got the foundational pieces in place, you've got the cap space to go out and add to that. I think those are two great ways to be a contending team and contend for the Super Bowl. But of course, whoever said that, I think Harrison, about the bet on J.J. McCarthy is the most important point in this, because if it doesn't work out, then the Vikings are not going to have a Super Bowl window. They're going to continue. Right. They're going to continue to be in the 8-9, 9-8 land, or below, or a little bit below, or even a lot more below, and a little bit above,
or a little bit above, and the one and out. Done.
Yeah. And even unless they massively, and I think the other thing is that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, it's been early, but he's also got to consistently draft better than he has. in the previous two. At least 2022 is not looking good. 2023, we still have, we'll see how that works out, although Jordan Addison, Mekhi Blackman look good, and the 2024 yet to be determined. But yeah, the pieces are in place. The setup is, there is a setup, there is a core foundation in place for the Vikings. The two compete for a Super Bowl, but of course, quarterback is where it's at, right? If you get that right, that makes things a lot easier on the Super Bowl window. And we just don't know if JJ McCarthy was the right bet to make at this point. We are encouraged, but the data and the performance is yet to be determined on that one.
Mm-hmm. Sorry for my expression. I was watching McElroy on a putt that should have dropped. The scores today. Father's Day tradition for me, because it generally follows on Father's Day, is the U.S. Open. I watched it. My dad played golf. I played golf. We watched the majors. This one's going up. Rochambeau is still 2 shots ahead of McElroy, but everybody's going backwards. They're plus on the day. So DeChambeau is -6 and McElroy is -4 right now after 4 and 5 holes. We'll see how that goes. Buddy, you got a tournament to get to, do you not?
Yeah, we play in an hour's time. Yep.
Well, make sure you stretch out so you don't injure yourself. You know, it's real easy to get hurt when you're older. And
true.
But I want you to have a great day. Hopefully you knock it out of the park quite a few times and get those outs at first base. And we'll see everybody next week. But so I want to remind everybody, hey, send us your questions. We'll feature them on the show next week if you want. It's going to be a fun next 5 weeks as we work through in the preparation to get up to training camp. Any last words, everybody?
None at all. Just happy Father's Day, everybody.
Happy Father's Day. And what do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, and thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!